there. We're not anywhere near there, but we are not headed in the right direction. Some things need to change. This is going to be a big episode with a lot of anxiety, a lot of speculation, a lot of hand-wringing, and hopefully some silver linings. So if you're not in the mood to hear a bunch of people speculate as armchair quarterbacks what they might do if they were running the show, this ain't the podcast for you. So definitely leave it running so we get the views, but step away. Everyone else who wants to join in the fun and have crazy conversation or listen into crazy conversation about our harebrained schemes for fixing the team, definitely buckle up because we're going to cover a lot of it today on the Clean Hits Hockey Podcast that you can find on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. You can join in the conversation on X or in our Discord, which is totally free and easy to sign up for. And you are free to lob insults, flame and troll us as much as you want through any of these platforms. YouTube comments are welcome. X comments are welcome. But please join the Discord and abuse us there like many of the Clean Hits fans in our online community already do. Make fun of me at the very least. Corey escapes most of the wrath because he doesn't say so many dumb things. Corey, I'm going to take my foot out of my mouth and pass it over to you. How you doing tonight?
Yeah, pretty good. Like you said, looking for silver linings and solutions here at this point. We're getting to the cutoff point with the American Thanksgiving where we see teams who I think you have to be in or out of the playoffs by 4 points, is it? And if that's the case, you have a 75% chance of making it. And right now, the Utah Hockey Club is closer to the bottom than it is to that playoff cutoff. So needed to make some changes here and really a time to strike because we're already seeing coaches getting changed around the league and starting to see not so much trades, but trade talk and teams looking to shake up the roster. So Utah Hockey Club needs to be a part of that as well.
Yes, a lot of things swirling, a lot of buzz generating. We've got a roster freeze coming our way around the Christmas holiday. So this is the time finally when you start to see some action again since, for the first time since training camp, really. And I know one guy who's really excited about all the action, but not nearly as excited as he is to have ejected Skeet Heatley from his office is Kenny. Kenny, yeah. I'm so glad you got that squatter out of there. You've taken possession of your home again, and I hope that things are going well. Are you picking up the pieces in your personal life now that you've ousted Skeet?
Yeah, no, it was definitely a tough couple weeks there. I'm just hoping my wife eventually comes back. But other than that, no, I'm happy to be here. It feels like it's been an eternity, and that guy really kind of stole the show last time. So hoping I don't disappoint this time. But yeah, to Corey's point, this is one of those times of the year that you get really excited as a hockey fan because you hear so much chatter, you see all the rumors, and you're like, yeah, this is what I love. But at the same time, you're like, man, like, what are we gonna do? Like, we're in such a weird spot right now. And there's players that we're gonna talk about that, maybe we can see, ousted for a change of scenery trade, and hope it's something that can, help propel the rest of the year here. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. And this will not be a vent session or a dumb session. We're looking for constructive criticism and ideas that we think might help pull us out of this rut in time to be playing meaningful games down the stretch, which the current record would not indicate will be the outcome if changes aren't made. And Corey, I know that Bill Armstrong did a bang-up job of not overpromising and setting proper expectations to this fan base. He's maintained all along that his expectation is not playoffs or bust. It's not either we qualify or there's going to be hell to pay. It was, I want to be competitive down the stretch. I don't necessarily expect the playoffs. But I do expect competitive hockey as this young team learns and grows together. That's not exactly where we're trending. Can you give me your thoughts, Corey, on where we're at in terms of achievement against expectations, and just kind of talk a little bit about your view on where we're at versus where we need to be?
Yeah, I mean, not only wanting to play competitive games down the stretch, but I mean, if things keep going like this, we're not even going to be playing competitive games at Christmas, right? Like I said off the hop, there, we're closer to the bottom than we are to the playoff race right now. Haven't been able to string together consecutive wins since that 3-0 start to the season. Have not been able to get any consistency, and I think there was a part of the season earlier in the year when we lost Sean Dursey and John Marino hasn't played all year, when you could point to the defense, but now we're into the point of the season, 20 games in, where I think the defense isn't amazing by any stretch, but especially since Ole Mata came in, that's really seemed to stabilize things. Mikhail Sergachev is one of our best players, game in, game out. Maverick Lamoureux, I mean, I know he's making a lot of rookie errors and that sort of thing, but he's been one of our better defensemen. Ian Cole's blocking all kinds of shots. He had 6 blocks in that Toronto game. Not a lot of issues with the defense, but it's really more of the core players and some of the veteran players who have been here a long time. Lawson Krause has gone more than a month without a point. He's somebody who this team needs to rely on for 20 goals, and we're almost to December here, and he has 2 goals, 1 assist. He had, even his last goal was kind of a garbage time goal, right? That horrible game against Colorado where he gets one in the dying minutes and it's 5-1 final. He's someone we need a lot more from. Nick Schmaltz, I mean, not somebody who you think of as a goal scorer, but still had 20 last year. And he's piled up the assists this year, but I mean, still without a goal this year. We've seen that the last couple of years from Barrett Hayton when he gets into December without a goal. So maybe it's Nick Schmaltz's turn this time. But yeah, needing a lot more from some of the core players. And if that doesn't come, then maybe some changes are needed.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different things we can point to. I think that was a great point you made about the injuries. I think a lot was made of that early on. I think that, guys, next man up has been quality. I think Bill Armstrong made a timely, much needed move to bring in Olli Mata, who's been great, helping to cover for the fact that Yusuf Valimaki is not injured, but it's not playing as well as he has the last couple of seasons. His play has declined significantly. He doesn't seem to be part of the solution currently. Olli Mata stepped up there. And then we've got a couple of young guys making up for the loss on the right side of Dursey and Marino in Kesselring and Lamoureux, who have been bright spots. Mostly, Lamoureux's got some penalty problems he needs to work his way through, but Kesselring and Lamoureux have both filled in admirably given their lack of experience. And I think that there's fingers pointing other directions apart from injuries, even though we've had some key defensemen injured. Dursey and Marino are both quality players. They're not exactly the kind of players that your entire season's hopes should hinge on. These are not all-stars, right? A team of quality and depth should be able to cope with losses like that. This team hasn't. This team currently, if the NHL season ended today prior to action against Montreal and the NHL draft lottery was held tomorrow, Utah would be going in, guess where? The 6th overall position, just where they picked last season when they got Tisha Ginla. So that means that despite big blockbuster trades over the summer, that despite the big move to Utah and the buzz of a new market, despite our young players stepping up in many cases like Cooley and Gunther having great seasons, Kenny, the needle hasn't moved. No. So I guess my question for you is, how far below expectations are we? And how much further away from those expectations can we get before there's consequences for the lackluster play? What do you think?
Well, I think a change is imminent. I don't think that you can look at the last 5 games that this team has played and hang your hat on that and say, okay, we're playing competitive hockey. I loved what you said. The needle hasn't moved, right? And even bad teams, you know you're going to be bad, but you see a learning curve and development. This team doesn't look like they're even developing. They're just losing games. It just looks stagnant. It looks like boring hockey. It looks like that this is their ceiling, and it's not going to get much better than that. And I'm not saying it's not going to. It's just what I've seen from this roster. I mean, players that went off to hot starts, or players that really haven't showed up this year at all. I mean, I'm looking at Michelli and I'm unfortunately Barrett Hayton. Last 5 games is kind of putting up goose eggs, right? I mean, he had a great start and now it just seems like, well, what's going on? We're just kind of jogging in place here and almost seemingly trying to get to the next break to reset, and it's just not good enough. So I'm going to stand by what I said earlier in the year, and say that there is going to be at least one more move before the roster freeze. And I think it's imminent. I think if there's a loss tonight, we could be looking at a significant change up here. And who knows where that is, management,
Right.
coaching, roster, etc.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really a
one
make or
would
break
hope.
road trip, right?
Yeah, go ahead, Corey. Yeah,
Like I mentioned, just that Thanksgiving cutoff, and to come into this road trip where 4 games you're going up against Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh is, I mean, that was just, they were letting us walk right into the zone. That was like, defense was optional, right? That was the 2 easy points. But you look at the rest of this road trip, you're going up against a Montreal team that's at the bottom, which, I mean, you'd think you can get 2 points out of that. Didn't play very well against Boston. I mean, even with the new coach bump, it's not like Boston had a great game either. So threw away 2 points there. Went into Toronto on, I mean, it was a back-to-back, but Toronto hadn't played since the Wednesday prior. They didn't have Austin Matthews. They didn't have Matthew Nyes. They didn't have Max Domi. They played 2 good periods, but the second period is probably one of the worst periods of the season, right? Along with that San Jose game and maybe some of the other games, but couldn't stay out of the box, just couldn't really get anything going. And it's just ties back into some of the points I made earlier, like Lawson Krause, especially. He has, I mean, not only the points things, but he hasn't even been close. Like, he's not hitting posts, anything like that. He's not in front of the net. His hits are half of what they were at this point a year ago. And even the hits he is throwing out, they're not big, knocking guys over, that sort of thing. They're kind of like love taps. So in my mind,
He's not a
excuse me hits. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Pardon me. Yeah.
He was supposed to be this power forward, and he's not. In my mind, he's due for at least a healthy scratch. And I mean, I get, thinking, okay, if he's scratched, then Liam O'Brien has to play. So you're not really helping with offense and things like that. And this team is a team that has struggled to score. But, the way he's playing, I don't think you're really risking anything, having him take a seat. And we've seen that around the league too, right? John Tortorella has scratched players like Jamie Drysdale. He's scratched Matvei Michkov this year because they've just needed a reset. And it's been more than a month here since Lawson Krause has had a point. So I think he needs a reset.
Yeah, he's been cold for a while. And I want to touch on that a little bit as we move forward here. But I think, Kenny, to your point, there could be a change to the roster. We've seen big changes over the summer. Some very popular high value assets were moved out, and JJ Moser, Connor Geeky, 3 second-round picks to bring in Sergachev and Marino. Marino's been injured, of course, and Sergachev has been arguably the MVP of the entire team, which is great. And yet here we are on pace to pick 6th overall yet again. So there may be more roster changes in the future. It seems that we've tried this. It hasn't worked. I imagine patience must be running thin. This is a very important season for the franchise, for setting the table for the new fan base. We don't want to wear them out with this treading water and backsliding and struggling kind of a season. Bill Armstrong set the expectation that this would be a season of highs and lows and young players developing. But this has been too many lows, and the lows have been too low. And I don't know that ownership and senior leadership patience is endless, especially since there have been some changes to the roster. There has been some shakeups there, and we haven't seen a lot of momentum. That's not to rule that out, but I do wonder, there are some players on the hot seat. I wonder if it's only players on the hot seat. We've seen around the league a lot of big-time coaching changes, a lot of big-time coaching rumors. Nobody believed heading into this season that Andre Tourigny had a short leash by any means. His seat felt ice cold, not even lukewarm heading into the year. But boy, things are changing quick, just with how kind of listless and inconsistent the team has looked in terms of effort and execution, kind of across the board. You cited a whole bunch of different players, Corey, young players, older players, wingers, forwards, and defensemen who have struggled mightily at various times. And one wonders if there's kind of a magic bullet there. Kenny, we've seen a lot on the coaching front in the league in general. We've heard some buzz. We've heard Gary Lawless hint at Andre Tourigny and chatter around him. What are your thoughts on the coaching situation around the league and the coaching situation with Utah?
Yeah, I agree with you that nobody expected to, if even if this team fell flat on its face, out of the gate, that Bear was going to be on his way out. But then you look around the league and a coach like Jim Montgomery, who has an insane track record. If his leash is short, who's to say that tourneys can't be, right? I mean, uh, Boston is a perennial playoff team and has Stanley Cups, right? What if they're making those moves because they feel that they're not moving in the right direction, or the message is wearing thin? Those are championship big league decisions. That's not something that the Coyotes were known for, and it's too early to tell yet if that's what Utah should be known for. But I again, how do you look at somebody like Jim Montgomery getting fired, and then Drew Bannister being fired right away in St. Louis so that they can grab Jim Montgomery? How do you look at that move and say, okay, well, why can't we do something similar? I've been on the record that I like Bear quite a bit. I'm sorry, Corey. I've been on the record that I like Bear quite a bit. I think he's an amazing developer. I think he's done wonders with our young roster. And he came from being an exceptional mentor and developer in juniors. But maybe that's where his message ends. Maybe he's great at developing players and getting them to be, everyday regular NHLers, and they're looking to him to say, okay, what's the next step? And maybe he just doesn't have it.
Yeah, and just to add to those two stories there with Boston and St. Louis, let's be more like those teams, right? Where they had an opportunity to act. And, I don't think it was really a coaching issue in Boston, but I can understand it where they're kind of in a cup window still, right? They just made the big commitment to Jeremy Swayman. They still have Brad Marchand there. They have Charlie McAvoy. So they're looking to contend. So they make the change despite, 2 years ago, Jim Montgomery and the Bruins set the NHL record for the best regular season ever. I mean, they did fall flat on their face there in the first round against Florida, but Florida was a very heavy, it was kind of like when LA won the cup as the 8th seed. So Florida wasn't your traditional 8 seed team playing Boston, but still, Jim Montgomery only had like 40 losses over 2.5-ish seasons with Boston. Right. Drew Bannister had a 600 something record with St. Louis last year. Andre Tournier has not had a 600 record at all in any season with Utah or Arizona. But there was an opportunity there for Doug Armstrong to act in St. Louis and bring in somebody better. So let's be more like Boston. Let's be more like St. Louis. Let's be more like the New York Rangers are 10th in the whole league, and they're talking about trading their captain and their longtime assistant captain there too, and Chris Kreider. Let's be more like those teams and not become the next Buffalo Sabres or the next Ottawa Senators, who have been stuck in this cycle of mediocrity for, I think, Buffalo's 13 years. It's so long you can't even keep track of how long they haven't made the playoffs. This was supposed to be a year where the Ottawa Senators made a step, and similar there, where they're almost taking a step back. They made the big moves. Linus Ullmark has not helped their goaltending there in Ottawa, and it's gotten to the point where the Senators might need to shake up their core as well in order to finally make that step.
Right.
Yeah. And Corey, I think the key word there was mediocrity, right? I think that's kind of the worst place you can be because it's not helping you build for the future, and it's not helping you right now. And I think that inaction can lead you there in a lot of ways. Dawdling can be a good recipe for mediocrity. And I think there's a little bit of a danger here, right? This is supposed to be a building season, not just so that we have fan support and excitement and things to cheer for all year, but it's building momentum for the future in a way that's building culture, right? So I think Bill Armstrong and his staff at the draft table have talked so much about culture builders, bringing in the Cole Baudouins, bringing in the Tijik Inlas, bringing in these pace car players who work hard and inspire their teammates and set a good example and bring all this character and culture to the rink. But culture is more than just the sum of the individuals in a group. It's environmental as well, right? And a lot of it is learned. So what good is it doing Logan Cooley and Jack McBain and Dylan Guenther to be developing in an environment of mediocre outcomes, inconsistent results, inconsistent efforts, and questionable day-to-day, game-to-game effectiveness of the team seemingly just kind of in an endless cycle of one step forward, two steps back. As we crawl from opponent to opponent. I don't know that that's the richest environment for young players to learn to thrive and excel in. They made a pointed effort to bring in a ton of Stanley Cup rings into that locker room, from Ian Cole to Sergachev, many Stanley Cup rings. I mean, Mata has them as well. They went crazy for experience. It hasn't yet paid off. And then you kind of have to look around at either the core players that were existing or the coaching staff for some way to switch that culture around before it permeates a little bit too deeply and leaves a little bit of a stain on the next generation that we're counting on to pull us up and out of this rebuild. So that would be one reason why me, a Tourney fan who's never supported a coaching change in the past, can start to understand some of those cries that are coming now for a change. I'm a little bit less ready to argue passionately, and I'm a little bit more ready to listen to reasonable points that are made about why a change could be necessary. My question, Corey, for you is, if they decided to make a change, what are some of the options out there? Have you heard rumors? Are there coaches currently with jobs who may soon be without them? We saw Montgomery get fired and then immediately another firing so that he could be hired. Is there a domino effect out there? Are there current coaches just kind of sitting on the sidelines and waiting for their chance to get back in the game? What are you thinking in terms of potential candidates?
I don't know if there's rumors out there rather than just our own speculation, but I mean, Jim Montgomery would have been a fantastic option. I mean, he does offer a lot of the same teaching background as Andre Tourney, coming from the NCAA route, but he also brings that winning experience too at the NHL level. Had a really good stop in Dallas, St. Louis as an assistant there, and then obviously the success we talked about there with Boston, at least in the regular season. And St. Louis acted quickly to get him, right? He was only unemployed for 5 days. Got rid of a coach who, I mean, they've had a slow start to this year, but Drew Bannister had a nice record last year. And good familiarity there with St. Louis, right? Having been a assistant there before, his family liked the city, so it was just a natural fit. But in terms of other options, I think, there's guys like Gerard Gallant, who's had a lot of stops around the league. He had success in the QMJHL with St. John Sea Dogs. I believe he went to back-to-back Memorial Cups, winning at least one, and then obviously the President's Cup title as well in the Q. Success with Vegas in that expansion team, especially that first year, right? It was like a Marc-Andre Fleury plus a ragtag group and brings them all the way to the finals. And they had so many challenges that year. They had 4, 5, 6 goalies in the first month of the year because they had so many injuries. Had success with the Rangers. I think he won the President's Cup there, the President's Trophy rather. Had success in, where was his other stop? Oh, Florida, right?
Florida.
With the disastrous end there and sending him into the cab. But success and every stop he's gone. And then, he's kind of got this reputation where his presence kind of grates on people after 2, 3, 4 seasons because he doesn't tend to last that long. But maybe he's off the hook with the Rangers now because he was only there for 2 years and was fired after some pretty good results. But now we're seeing these rumors about the Rangers core, so maybe that wasn't on Gallant, right? Maybe the problem was the roster itself. So I think he would be one name. He would be probably at the top of my list right now. Jim Montgomery would have been a very strong candidate, but he's off the board. So if they were to make a change, my vote would be for Gerard Gallant.
Kenny, any other names that you wanted to bring up?
Maybe not want to bring up, but I think we have to. Right. And that's Joel Quenneville. Joel Quenneville is, I mean, he's one of the greatest coaches, over the last 20 years of hockey. That being said, it's something I don't want to touch. And, without getting into it too much on this podcast, I mean, like people can Google his name and kind of see why, if you don't know already, why he's not necessarily a name that people are firing their coaches to go hire right away. I mean, he's a free agent. He's available. But that's something that eventually somebody's going to hire him. And it's going to come down to, who is that and who, they're going to have to go through all the PR battles once they do that. And just with track record with the team that I have followed, I'm hoping it's not us, just due to the fact that we've had so much bad PR in the past. But I mean, again, he's going to be hired by somebody. One point that I wanted to hammer down on with what Corey said.
Well,
here
you know what? Just right before we move on from Quenneville, though, without relitigating that, and I have no interest in relitigating that. I'm not going to be in any arguments on the internet about Joel Quenneville at any point ever about anything that happened in Chicago. But what I'll say is this: his boss in Chicago just got a job with the Edmonton Oilers. And that equated to just about a mouse fart worth of bad PR. Nobody smelled it. Nobody heard it. Nobody noticed it. It was a big nothing burger north of the border. I wasn't in the room in Chicago. I don't know what occurred. I don't know who is more or less culpable. I know both men were reinstated by the league. And I know that from my perspective, Stan Bowman was a senior leader and Joel Quenneville was a manager.
Right.
And where the buck stops is probably higher up in the org. And if that guy got a second chance, who's to say that this guy can't too? That's my take without knowing any of the details and not necessarily advocating for Joel Quenneville as a coaching candidate for the Utah Hockey Club by any means. I would just say that I wouldn't rule out the possibility, given the precedent of what occurred with Bowman in Edmonton. Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to throw that out there, Kenny.
No, it's okay. It's a good point. And I think that a lot of the league kind of shares your same sentiment. Like, oh, Bowman's hired, and he's hired to one of the more storied franchises in the league. And correct, you're right. I mean, nobody seemed to bat an eye at it after a couple of days after it was announced. So somebody is going to hire him. It's going to have to be a pretty unique situation where somebody has been clamoring for him for a while and they finally say, okay, enough's enough. We're grabbing him. I don't necessarily see that being us. One of Corey's points is Gerard Gallant. Gerard Gallant to me reminds me a lot of Pete DeBoer. Pete DeBoer has, been all over the place and has a winning record no matter where he goes. Now I think they have very different coaching styles. I think Pete DeBoer is less abrasive. So I think that's something that, like what you said, can start to wear on people after a while when you're just sitting there screaming until you're red in the face. And that dude does get red in the face. I don't know if you've seen the pictures, but to Corey's point, I think that if we wanted Gallant, if it was just for the sake of change and we wanted Gallant, Gallant would have been hired already. That's just my point of view. So I think, and I'm
still getting paid by the Rangers right now, as much as he's not there. Yeah,
that's true. I think that it's a tough situation because I think if we do have to fire Bear, Gallant would immediately be my first choice. I like Gallant a lot as a coach. But that doesn't necessarily strike me as, hey, like this is our guy, right? I don't know if I'm wording that correctly, but I don't see him as the main target for this team because I think that there would have been a move already. I think that's the way the bill operates. So a long-winded answer to your question, Trent. I do think that if Bear is replaced, the guy I do believe that will replace him is Gallant.
Yeah, I like Gallant a lot as well. I've been fond of his since his St. John Sea Dogs days back in the QMJHL. He's had a lot of success at every stop. Doesn't have those elusive cup rings, though. He's been pretty close. With this team being super hellbent on bringing in championship pedigree, there is a coach on the hot seat that meets that criteria, who has some ties to the organization, very, very old ties, I'll grant it. But I remember him from my days as a peewee or a squirt back in youth hockey and watching him block shots and be an amazing penalty killer and defensive center. And that's Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh, whose days are probably numbered. The Penguins are one of the worst teams in the NHL. It's spiraling down quick there. I could see him being let go. I know that Chris Armstrong has some loose ties to Kyle Dubas and the Pittsburgh Penguins, and his experience with them was kind of some of the hockey expertise that Smith leaned on heavily. So potentially maybe some flimsy little ties there, but I think more to your point, Kenny, Gallant's been on the market. Nobody picked him up. He's not really this shiny object right now. You see the league kind of do these things where people get into a little frenzy over something new. You see it with these college free agents all the time that almost never pan out, but everybody gets super excited about them. And there's this like huge competition to sign the top NCAA free agent every year. And then they usually end up being like mediocre AHL players who like are the third leading scorer on their Swiss league team 4 years from then. But like it's a league of getting caught, swept up in a trend. And I think with Jim Montgomery having that pedigree and having been let go and immediately snatched up, that if Mike Sullivan were to get let go with his championship pedigree, suddenly there'd be this huge market for Mike Sullivan, perhaps. And I could see Smith and Chris Armstrong and maybe even Bill being like, hey, look, here's going to be a difference maker. Here's going to be a culture changer. Here's going to be the brand recognition we need. Here's a guy who's going to walk into that room with some swagger and the resume to back it up. And our guys are going to stand up and listen and take notice. And we're going to see a big change in a way that a trade might not necessarily influence things. So that might be something to keep an eye on, is another scenario where a coach gets let go and it has a domino effect. So maybe something to think about for Utah. But I don't want to dismiss the trade idea outright. Corey, I think you made some really great points about Lawson Crouse struggling of late. I would argue that he's been struggling a lot longer than people really realize. I would say that Lawson Crouse has been cold for all of 2024. He had a huge November last November 2023. But in the calendar year of 2024, he's played 68 games. He's got 10 goals, 13 assists for 23 points. That is cold as ice. It's not a small sample size. That's pretty rough for a 68 game sample on the associate captain with a $4+ million paycheck that the team's relying on in many different ways. Go ahead, Kenny.
I was going to say, if it's any consolation, he's absolutely crushing no points November right now. So
it's sober October, no points November. Yes. Last year, he didn't hold up his end of the bargain when he lit the league on fire. I think he was like second in the NHL in goals in November last year. But this year, Goose Egg City, he said 1 point in his last 19 games, Corey. That's a little easier to dismiss as a sample size than 68. I've seen a lot of chatter online about everything that he brings to the table outside of his scoring, which I can agree with to some extent. A lot is made of his penalty killing. I would mention that he's the third penalty killer in terms of forwards average ice time. And the penalty kill's bad, and he's on the second unit of the penalty kill. And I will say that he's closer to the fifth guy in terms of average ice time as far as forwards go than he is to the second guy. So it's sort of like the top PK unit, and then it's kind of a big pile of everyone else. He's in that big pile of everyone else. To your point, the hit stats are down and the quality of those hits seem to be wanting. But even if you say, listen, he's a great defensive forward, he's been taking tough matchups, he has been handling those rough penalty kill situations, his defensive zone starts, he still starts the majority of his faceoffs in the offensive zone. But even if you want to say that he's getting the toughest matchups and the toughest minutes, which I'm not sure is true, I don't think the advanced stats would bear it out. But let's just suspend that for a second and say that his under the hood metrics are top notch. And he's a great defensive forward. What you've got then effectively is a winger version of Kevin Stenlund. Kevin Stenlund is a great penalty killer. He's a great defensive forward. He's got great metrics. He's exactly what you want from a fourth liner shutdown matchup checking line player. He makes a fraction of what Lawson Krause makes. He has a fraction of the expectations. He gets a fraction of the ice time. He gets a fraction of the power play and offensive zone time. And he's not the associate captain. So if the best you can say is at least he's as good as Kevin Stenlund, I really don't think that's good enough. I think you need more out of this player. And especially when it comes to a core member of the leadership group and setting the tone for the younger players who are developing. Cold streaks happen. This is more than that. This is 68 games of a cold streak. And this is a player who's been, for my liking, a bit too hot and cold throughout his career. It's easy to think of him as a young player because he came up through this organization and we watched him grow. But at a certain point, top NHL players separate themselves via consistency. Consistency is the secret ingredient that separates fringe players from star players, and it's been elusive to him to this point. And at some point, you have to kind of reevaluate the player and say to yourself, yep, he's healthy, he contributes, his counting stats are generally good at the end of 82 games, but if he's a great player for 40 and he's kind of sleepwalking for 40, what are the downsides to that outside of what you see on the score sheet? So I think that's definitely somebody to be looked at. I would hope that a healthy scratch would have come by now. It hasn't. To your point, Corey, he's not alone in terms of guys out there. But anything you wanted to add on Lawson Krause from either of you? I think I talked way too much just then.
I mean, beyond a healthy scratch, I think I would also like to see him swap in that baby blue jersey for maybe one that's red and black and has a Trojan on the front, and he can be the next Ottawa Senator.
Yeah, I could see it. There's rumors swirling around the Senators. They want a major change up to their crew. They're kind of a flat team like Utah, who's hoped to take a step and haven't. They're looking to make a change to their leadership group. One guy I've seen specifically called out a bunch is Joshua Norris, who we identified as a potential candidate, and put a poll on X. There's still, I think, a day left to vote in that. If you're interested on who the winner would be or who would say no, I think is how we phrased it on X. So if anyone wants to check that out, check out @CleanHitsHockey on X or jump into our Discord and tell us how foolish we are for suggesting Norris for Krause. But Corey, I'll let you defend all of us on the Krause for Norris take. What do you think about that prospective, speculative deal?
Yeah, I see a lot of parallels between where Utah is and where Ottawa is. Ottawa's rebuild probably started, 2-3 years sooner than Utah's, and they just haven't been able to move up the ladder, right? This was supposed to be a year where they make the playoffs. They brought a new GM, they brought a new coach, they brought a new starting goalie, and they're not moving up the standings. And it's a big year for them, right? Because if they don't make the playoffs, then you could see things like their captain, Brady Tkachuk, wanting a change. He saw his brother move out of Calgary and go down to Florida, better living situation and better winning situation as well, right? So, and then you see longtime Senators beat reporter Bruce Garriock with the Ottawa Sun and the Ottawa Citizen bring up that, maybe the Senators need to make a change to their core. And one of the names that he raised was Josh Norris. Josh Norris is somebody who, he's got a 35 goal season, but I know in our group chat, Trent, you mentioned it was a bit of a fixer-upper, right, with Josh Norris, because you're betting on somebody who's twice had shoulder surgery. He's got the long contract. He's making almost $8 million until 2030, but he's still relatively young. He's younger than Krause, and he's producing, right? He's one of the top Senators this year. Despite they're not getting the wins, he has, last I looked, he has 13 points, and he's a center. And I mean, we do have some pieces at center between Cooley. We got Barrett Hayton, we got Cole Beaudoin coming up, but still could use another piece there. And we do have, almost too many wings, right? We're going to have Daniel Boot coming. We're going to have Iginla coming. So needing to create a space. And, maybe there is an opportunity there where we can swap out Lawson Krause and bring in Josh Norris and really solidify that center spot with, who knows if Logan Cooley is going to be a number one center, but, at worst you could have 2-3 second line centers between Cooley, Josh Norris, and then Barrett Hayton. And then you can, add in Jack McBain. You can add in Cole Beaudoin. You can add in maybe TJ Ginla as a center at this level. And then you really have something at center ice.
Yeah. And I think with Norris, you've got a center who's a trigger man, especially on the PP, plays that bumper role quite well. and is an element we're missing in our center group. Our top line wingers are kind of playmakers, with Schmaltz and Keller sort of developing shot phobia at different times, and it's sort of disastrous when they both catch shot phobia at the same time. So having a finisher between those two who's a bit of a workhorse may work well. I mean, we've seen it with Barrett Hayton at times when he is shooting the puck, how well somebody can do in that role as they begin to thrive. Kenny, any thoughts on Norris?
Yeah, I like Norris. I mean, the injury issues scare me a little bit, but it's a gamble I'd be willing to take. I mean, he scored 35 goals before, as we talked about here. And on a team where, offense is, Ottawa's not known to be like a juggernaut offensively, right? So I do like the potential. I mean, if it's for Lawson Krause, I take that deal all day. I think that Lawson Krause, I'd wish him well. He's the longest tenured player within this organization, transitioning from Arizona to Utah. Maybe it is time for a change here. Maybe it just got a little monotonous, and a change up would benefit him. And I do think that addition by subtraction kind of sounds a little aggressive, but I do think it's time. So I would entertain that. This is not going to be the most popular opinion, and it's, I'm probably going to hear about it, but I think that if we add to the center group that we have right now, I'd probably look to make a move with Barrett Hayton going out for some help, whether that's young defensive help or another position in need in goaltending. I really like Barrett Hayton. I like the idea of him, but again, this is a guy that has hot and cold streaks from hell, right? He has had 2 shots in his last 5 games. Or I'm sorry, 4 shots in his last 5 games. That's just not doable. I mean, that's you gotta be shooting the puck more. And he's been up and down the lineup. And again, I think maybe time has come with him as well. I'd also say the same thing about Michelli. I love him as a player. He's a small, skilled winger that can, make some amazing passes here. But it just, if we're really going to try to build a championship team, we need to move some of these prototypes out and bring in some real big boys to play here. And if not, we are the New York Islanders. We are the Ottawa Senators. We are the Buffalo Sabres. It's just, just being okay with mediocrity.
Neither of those two guys, Bill Armstrong, draft picks either, right? Both selected by John Chaika. So
that's correct.
I mean, that kind of goes in the favor of them getting moved out eventually, right? They weren't brought in by the current administration. And I mean, obviously they're good players, but you do see that a lot, right? Where more GMs want their own guys, and those are 2 pieces he inherited.
Right. Yeah, and I think, Kenny, that was a great point you made about it maybe being good for Lawson Krause. He is a player who gets hot. I think that when he's at his best, brings exactly what Ottawa needs, what Ottawa's been missing. It's a change to their leadership group, which is much needed for them. I think that Utah needs a much needed change, and I think Josh Norris is the kind of guy who can bring that here. The injury issues are a huge red flag. But to my point earlier, you got a guy who plays 40 games well, sleepwalks through 40, or you got a guy who plays 60 games well and is injured for 20 reliably. The math still works out in our favor, even if he's on the IR a lot, right? So as long as he can maintain at least the degree of health he's had so far without it declining seriously, that to me looks like an upgrade for a guy who's still only 25 and whose big, fat, ugly-looking contract does expire when he's 30. So he's not going to be over the hill and overpaid. I don't know if he's the kind of guy who prevents you from winning. He does give you options, whether that be Hayton, whether that be Baudouin down the line, whatever. He shores up that center depth, which opens up options for future trades and shoring up other positions as the need arises. So that's one candidate. I think we're working on a trade piece where we're going to come out with many different candidates. I think we can talk endlessly about different names and speculations here. We'll call it at this point with just the one guy. Maybe we'll come out talking about Ridley Gregg and Keandre Miller and Jacob Trouba and Lindgren and Romanov and many other different options. Juracek is another big one that's around the rumor mill. We can talk about all of those. in future podcasts and in future articles, which you're going to find by subscribing to our Substack. Go to cleanhitshockey.com to see the blog version of the podcast where we have a ton of great content on there. Brush up on your prospects. We've got the CHL versus USA Top Prospect Series this week. The online hockey world is abuzz with excitement for it. We profiled a ton of those players in our Ivan Halinka series. So go back and read that and brush up on these future stars that are going to be on display during that series that you can watch on CHL TV, on NHL Network, or on TSN for those of you in Canada or those of you who lie about being in Canada on the internet so you can watch Canadian streams. Anyway,
VPN, baby, VPN.
Not that we would ever advocate for that kind of piracy, but maybe. Someone in our Discord, I'm sure, will be happy to show you how to do that. If you don't know, but you'll have to join the Discord to figure it out. Go to our Twitter account at Clean Hits Hockey. Check our bio. You will see our link tree, which will hook you up with the link to the Discord to join for free. You'll see tonight in our game day thread, there's more action in our game day chat on game days than anywhere else on the internet. We blow even X out of the water. Nobody talks more hockey more regularly than on Clean Hits' Discord anywhere on the internet. I've said it. I mean it. If you prove me wrong, I'll eat my shoe. It ain't going to happen. So having said all that, I think I'm ready to call this so we can get ready for the game tonight against Montreal and see what happens, win or lose, if a shakeup's coming or if the guys on the ice figure it out. Anything you guys want to add in closing?
Got half hour before the game starts, so let's go help Lawson Krause pack his bags.
Yeah. And to Trent's point, this quick little fun story to end. I walked away from my phone for about a half hour the other night. And I forget which game it was. We had a back-to-back. And I'm just trying to get my kids ready for bed. And I come back out and my wife is like, your phone's going nuts. Absolutely bananas. And I looked and I had 103 notifications from Discord. And it's just, that sounds outrageous, but if I read them all. It's so fun to be a part of our little community because we just sit there. It's like hanging out, drinking, watching the game with your pals, right? So definitely join. It's my favorite thing. I didn't know what Discord was until this all came about, and now it's one of my most commonly used apps. So give it a try. We have a lot of fun there, and let's go Utah, I think.
Yeah, heck yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It'll be the perfect place for you to go to tell us how dumb we are when Lawson Krause has a 3-goal night tonight. After Lawson Krause's hat trick in Montreal, sign up for the Discord, log in, call us morons, drop all the Lawson Krause gifts, and we will happily celebrate with you. All right, so with that, for Corey, for Kenny, I'm Trent. This is Clean Hits. Keep tuning in. Join the Discord. We'll see you soon.
We know we're running it now. Watch the game change. Watch the game change.